Hey everybody, Tommy Norman with the Nashville Blues and Roots Alliance. I have a great conversation coming up with Congilio, who is a Nashville-based guitarist, singer, songwriter, producer, YouTuber. You name it, he does it. I found him through his YouTube channel, but then I caught him at the Underdog where he plays about once a month. He has some of the tastiest guitar riffs around. If you haven't already joined the Nashville Blues and Roots Alliance, become a member at bluesandroots.org and help support your local blues community. And now enjoy this interview with Congilio. Hey, Corey, thanks so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you agreeing to do this for me on an early morning.
Oh, my pleasure, Tommy.
So, as you know, we are the Nashville Blues and Roots Alliance. So let's get right into the blues, and let's start with what introduced you to the blues. What was the first thing you remember hearing and kind of really got you into it?
Well, like many guitar players that are my age, and I'm sure younger, found it through players like Stevie Ray Vaughan. My dad, if you were a child of the 90s, you had Van Halen, but then you had the blues Van Halen, in my opinion, which was
Right,
SRV, because not necessarily because of the physical playing ability, but because of the impact. It like made it cool again,
right.
or something, or kind of just brought it more to the forefront. You could see blues on MTV, and that was pretty huge. So my dad had the Texas Flood cassette, and he went to work. He played guitar. All my uncles played guitar, um, and he said, "Check this out," and he went to work. And I was like, why does it sound like there's two guitar parts playing at the same time? Like this was it blew my mind. And then like a lot of, us, we start to go backwards from there. We're like, what is this Albert King person he keeps talking about? And who are all these people? And then from there it just, becomes like uh a choose your own adventure of the blues once you find someone that sparks you. Yeah.
Right. I was the same way. I came up in the 80s and I was an 80s shred head.
Uh-huh.
But then you were seeing all the shred guys next to like Steve Ray Vaughan or like people like Eric Johnson who was mentioning him and stuff like that. And I went backwards where all those guys would then talk about, they liked Led Zeppelin. And so I was going back to that. And then Led Zeppelin would talk about how they love Robert Johnson and this, that, and that.
Right.
And you go back and then you kind of come back forward and you get into the more contemporary guys like Stevie Ray, Robert Cray, and those guys.
Yep. And that was kind of there was definitely like more than a trifecta, but it was Stevie Ray, Clapton, Robert Cray, because you got to think also this is like the height of the Fender custom shop. So you're seeing a lot of those guys, Buddy Guy, of course, um, and Jimmy Vaughn. So you'd see all these like sort of proper, blues icons that were alive and well, thankfully, at the time. And they were fully influencing me. Um, but I loved the aggressiveness of Jeff Healey and Gary Moore. So you're talking about 80s shred guys, like there's Gary Moore, I remember going back and checking out earlier Gary Moore and being like, what? This can't possibly be the same guy because he's tapping and doing stuff. But I love the fact that he really was playing the blues with his aggressive thing. And
Sure.
this is something I love and still do. Like I still want to put the pedal down when I play and really try to go for the throat like a guy like Gary Moore did, because I get the sense they're all really truly paying homage to the people they admired,
Sure.
like you're
And
saying, the
even
Stones.
And even those shred guys in the late 80s, there was a guy named Blue Saraceno, and he
Of
came and did
course.
at Rock Block, and he did a thing, and he said, listen, all my stuff is just BB King with a lot of distortion and sped up about 5 times. And
Yeah.
that's all I do.
So it was funny. I remember I was probably 14 or 15. I went to a clinic at my local music store with blues and thought to myself, oh man, that would be cool to do that one day. And I have like a bunch of, and I'm like, okay, like, small little things can happen. And again, it was all, like you said, I was like, that guy's really awesome. It just sounds like fast blues, but it was really, really good, and
Right.
super tasteful, and tone was amazing, and everything.
Well, and when I listen to your stuff, you do have tons of different influences because I can, on your channel especially, we'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
You do have a lot of blues stuff, but you kind of showcase a lot of different things. I think when I came and saw you at the Underground, I was talking about when you did the Bill Withers stuff with the wah that I
Yeah.
thought was so cool. You just nailed that sound. So, you've mentioned a couple of people, but I hear lots of different influences in that plan. So as you were kind of making your progression, who besides the ones we've talked about, like especially like the old guys that really kind of started sneaking into your style?
Well, I had this interesting thing happen to me, and you made me think of it when you were talking about Memphis because I had my first real blues gig was in Pittsburgh with an artist, and she still is in the scene. Her name's Barbara Blue, and Barb used to play at Silky's in Memphis every week, and it was mostly her and a piano player. But she gave me a shot, and I was like 18 or 19. Um, and you know, I'm sorry, I'm losing the train of thought. You're asking more about my influences, right?
Right. Older influences and things
Yeah.
like that.
So I dug back in the influences. This will come full circle. But one of the things the bass player who was really awesome, he was kind of like if Jocko played blues. He was so good. Played fretless. It was awesome. And he would always say like people really treat blues like it's this relic up on a mantle that they take down and polish off and put back. And that's the way I saw the older players. I was like, well, why should I try to sound exactly like them? I should take something from them and try to create my own voice, and there are people that are doing that. There's plenty of people that don't, and that's okay if they want to play more, traditional sounding stuff. But my influences were such that I said, well, can I take things I learned from rock guitar players that I liked, funk guitar players that I liked, country guitar players, and put it into a more bluesy style, which cultivates what I am, as a player. And maybe that'll sound cool. I still don't know, but some people like what I do, and that's fine. So the influence thing, it did come from far and wide. But that thing that he told me about not treating it too traditional or like a museum piece really stuck with me because it made me say like, man, you might not always be everybody's cup of tea, but at least you'll sound like yourself.
Right.
So all of the old influences of all the different styles have all influenced me to kind of say, okay, but what can you do with it as opposed to just regurgitate it?
Right.
So
Because you're to the point, a lot of people our age who grew up with Stevie Ray sound like Stevie Ray. Like there's a lot of people
exactly.
who sound like Stevie Ray, and not that that's bad, because Stevie Ray was great, and but having kind of an original sound, original voice. I remember like when Johnny Lang came out. I love Johnny Lang because he kind of had something a little different, and it was a little bit of that still sounded old, but
Yeah.
sounded new at the same time, which I
Right.
found so cool.
Yeah, I think there's been a handful of people that have done that particularly well. Like Sean Costello
Yeah,
was awesome at that.
I
Um,
love Sean, and
yeah, and Johnny.
sorry he's gone. Yates McKendry, who opened up for Eric Scott Gales the other day,
Yeah,
sometimes sounds to me like a Sean Costello.
yeah. I could see that for sure. It's funny, like I remember him coming to. We used to do a blues gig at Puckett's. It's not there anymore. It's the Puckett's Boathouse, which is in Franklin, right
Right.
before the other Puckett's. And when Billy Block was alive, it was his gig, and we would play, and Derek St. Holmes would always sit in, and Brad Whitford would come in, and um, Sandy Gennaro played drums a lot, which was awesome. Um, and man, we just had a great time with all those cats sitting in from the rock world and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's a very Nashville thing.
Yeah.
It's, all, these guys that just, are just around all the time and you never know who's going to pop up in there.
Yeah. Oh, but my point was that Kevin McKendry would play sometimes,
Yep.
and Yates was that big, and would come in and like sit on piano at like 11 years old or whatever, and just
Yeah.
blow me away.
And it's great to see him doing his own thing. He's
Yeah.
playing, and then the guy named Mac McDonald, his second guitarist playing, who has his own kind of, he's got the BB stank face down like nobody's business. It's great to see all these new guys. So to that point, let's talk about new people. Like who's out that's more contemporary now, the younger generation that's coming in the blues and roots thing that you're kind of, digging.
Oh man, I wouldn't say that my finger's like entirely on the pulse of that because in the past 2 or 3 years ago, I've kind of gone like pretty insular into I don't listen to a lot of new stuff these days, just because I'm a sponge by trade, and I will start trying to copy somebody. Um, so that's been a really hard thing for me to do is say, okay, don't listen too much to new music. I know it sounds completely counterintuitive,
No, I
but
get it.
I will try to like if I listened to too much Brothers Landreth, I would try to start playing it slide in C,
Yeah,
tuning, and because I would want to do it. And I think to myself, if I did that, am I wasting time trying to be my own person if I'm trying to see what they're doing or see what
sure.
Joey's whatever? So my point is that I'm trying to kind of cultivate my own voice, which is by not really checking too many people out. Now I think that like Marcus King is kind of like the dude.
Yeah,
Like I think, he's because the reason thing is you could be a bluesy influenced player and have songs and be able to create a show that isn't like you heard five shuffles in a row,
right,
which I think some people fall into. Anybody that's really like song oriented, and that's what I'm trying to do over the next year or two, is put more songs together that I can present in a way that feels like more of a show. Like that's what I always loved
right,
about Robert Cray or Keb Mo. Amazing songs, like really, really great songs, and great playing, you know,
right.
as opposed to the song being a vehicle just to play guitar.
Right.
So
And also, like you said, mixing it up. It's totally okay to have a 1-4-5,
yeah,
but something that, sounds a little different or sometimes has a little, different structure in it, but
yeah,
still very bluesy.
yeah,
That's the thing like I liked about Eric Clapton is, he went through all those different styles over the years that he went to, but it was always Eric Clapton and it always sounded like
totally,
Eric Clapton.
totally.
With me, I'm another Steve Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix guy, and so people say, "Can you play this like a pop song, like we do, No Diggity?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can play that. It's going to sound like Jimi Hendrix no matter what I do." But yeah, we could do that.
Yep, yep,
I get it. The same thing of, I'll listen to somebody and they get me really inspired, and I start playing a lot, and I think I've done something original. I'm like, no, I just did. I got so caught up in what I just heard that I, not even intentionally start emulating it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. You have to be careful.
You're 100% right, and that's why I'm kind of because I'll try to like write a song in the style of what I heard, and I'm like, no, just what's it like if you just draw from no influence? Is that
Right.
possible? And I think I'm old enough and experienced enough now that I can do that. And some of the stuff I've written lately, like it doesn't sound like anything that I would have done before.
Right.
And it's funny because when I think of younger up and comers or whatever, and even I still think of people like my age, like Josh Smith or Matt Scopia, and I'm like, well, those are the guys to check out. But like they've been doing it for so long. Where me,
Yeah.
like I've been under the radar working for other artists, but secretly wanting to be the blues musician that I desire.
Right.
So I feel like, well, I'm new.
Yeah. Well, you get a lot of those, 20-year overnight successes. So,
Exactly, and
these guys have been around forever, and then suddenly something happens that catches the mainstream eye,
yeah,
and then they're like, "Look at this new person." I'm like, "No, that person's been doing this for a long time."
yeah. No, I mean, obviously, like getting guys in the scene like Kingfish, having him do his thing is so important.
Right.
You're talking about this is this is a young black man doing this, and we should be honoring the fact that he's keeping such a beautiful tradition happening, and not someone who's pretending to play
Right.
a role. You know,
Right. And
I think
he's the same way. He has all three of those elements. He's a blazing guitarist
yeah,
and can just rip it, but he can sound very traditional. But then also when you go to his album, it's got songs. It doesn't have blues
yeah.
songs. It has songs on it.
And that's what was great about Johnny Lang in the day, when he
Right.
came out, is he had great, I mean, Lie to Me is a radio hit for a damn good reason because it's a great song.
Then you have like Matchbox, and you have like,
Yep.
the Rack 'em Up is one of my favorite
Rock
ones,
'em Up's
and it
great.
has a trombone solo in it, for God's sake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's switch gears and let's talk about the trek from New Jersey
Pittsburgh. There
Yeah.
seemed to be a stop in Ohio for a little while, and but finally now landed here in Nashville.
Yeah.
What brought you to Nashville? It's probably going to be the obvious, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, I was in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's so close to the borders of Ohio and West Virginia, and there's an area there called the Ohio Valley in which I played a lot. It was so crazy that only an hour from Pittsburgh, there was so many more opportunities to play music, and we would play shows, like 90-minute shows with artists, and there'd be people there, and I'd make as much money in 90 minutes as I would in a 3-hour, bar gig in Pittsburgh. And I was like, well, this is what I want to do. And by the way, there's people here and there's girls here and it's fun and they're giving us beer in the dressing room. I never had, and it was just a little area of Ohio. And I was playing with an artist there who's a good friend of mine now, and um I was like, man, I think I can do this. I think I can do the session thing. I want to move to town. Everything in my life was kind of in that spot where you're like, okay, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it, sort of a thing. And moved to town. I had gigs before I moved to town, which was awesome. So I had like income and, touring right away. Uh, and, you know, the town is giving me probably as much as anybody would ask for or expect when
Right.
they move.
So tell me some of your, favorite artists that you've kind of, been able to work with being here in the town. What are some of your favorite venues? I know I've seen you at the Underdog and you're there quite a bit as well. What you tell me what your Nashville experience has been as far as, and we'll, it doesn't have to always be blues, but as far as
Yeah.
the people and the places.
Well, the cool thing about Nashville, first of all, there was a real toss up between Nashville and Austin when I moved here, because Austin had the what's the word I'm looking for? There was just a lot of different music happening there all the time. The diversity
Mhm.
I was drawn to because I'm a diverse player. I'd be interested in playing in a funk band and a blues band and a country band, and a singer-songwriter thing. All that stuff would always interest me. Um, and Nashville didn't have that. It's starting to have it a lot more now, which is cool. But yeah, that's what really was. I just had more friends here, which is why I moved here. That being said, I longed for in the 90s in Nashville, you'd go to Printer's Alley and there'd be not only Bourbon Street but Congo Square, and these other places that you could hear different music too. And that was real attractive to me, but the thing that did bum me out was that, oh man, I'm just going to have to play with either on Broadway and play all these covers or tour with an artist and never really feel completely fulfilled because I'm
Right.
playing all of their songs, which is fine and has certainly served me well for a long time. But the thing I like about Nashville now is that it is expanding, not just this way with
Right.
buildings, but in a more diverse way, which is cool. Obviously, the Underdog's a super great place to play and go to hear music because they keep it diverse and they keep it real artist centric too. They don't try to micromanage you. They don't tell you you're too loud. They don't tell you to stop or when to start, any of that kind of stuff. They just instituted a cover charge on the weekends now, and this is after 3 years of being open or whatever, 2 years. Um, so they've had the ability to hear great music for free for a long time. Um, so that's obviously a great place run by people who are artists themselves, which is awesome. I used to love. I don't go to Bourbon Street much anymore, but I still love it when I do get a chance to go there. Um, I don't really go downtown too much these days, but you know I used to enjoy the old listening room. That was fun to go to. Um, D's is still really cool. And I haven't been to some of the other. I haven't been to Brooklyn Bowl or Brown's Diner, but I hear that they're really good hangs, for sure. So those places, I would love to see more of those with steady music. My favorite place downtown is Acme because they
Yeah.
always have cool music. Um, I'd like to actually try to play there. Played there a long time ago. Anyway, so those are some of my favorite spots to hit. Um, and some of my favorite gigs and artists I've played with in town. Probably the one that's the most musically fulfilling and challenging was an artist named Lucy Silvas. And Lucy's a great singer-songwriter in town who had a really successful career in the UK, moved here, made friends with some of the most talented people in town, um, and is a fantastic artist and writer on her own now that she's here for over 10 years. Um, so I toured with her a lot. Her music is not country. It is somewhere along the lines of like what you think of Americana and R&B. So it's
Okay.
like a combination of that stuff. So it allowed me to kind of be the guitar player I like to be. Um, and it just so happens she's married to John Osborne, a Brothers Osborne. So
Okay.
there's a lot of cross pollination there. We do shows with them. We tour with them. We did right when Chris Stapleton started to get massive. We did a tour with him and Brothers Osborne. So it was us, them, and Brothers Osborne, which was awesome. It's nobody's playing the tracks. We're all just playing. Uh, the music like as a 3 or 4 piece. You know, rhythm section at that time, and it sounded really good. She's an amazing singer. So that was really fun. And then one of my bucket lists being still a fan of country music, particularly 90s country. I was like, man, I'd like to play with like a 90s country legend. So I got to play with David Lee Murphy for a few years, who's written 20-ish #1 songs. And every song, every gig with him was kind of like playing the hits.
Right.
So that was like a bar band on a stage. He would just turn and look at you and point, and that's when you solo. So that was cool because there was an improvising level to it. Um, Not as free as like what you'll see me do on my gigs, but it was still fun. We did some
Right.
tours. So those have been some really cool highlights.
Well, and I love that when you were talking about the venues, of venues that respect artists and are for
Yeah,
artists. Obviously you are there for the crowd and you have to make money and things like that. And Broadway, Broadway is a machine and it's a machine for a reason,
it is.
and and it's serving a purpose. But you're right, it's very kind of, set, and it is really all about the tourists. And
I
that's
was
not
at
bad.
No, I was playing in Midtown. Well, I sat in at Tin Roof in Midtown once, and I was literally got up on stage, grabbed the dude's guitar, talked to the singer, and within like 30 seconds, the manager was like, "Hey, don't stop. We got to keep going. Like, the music has to keep going."
Yeah.
Like it was, and I was like, "Wow, this is something I never want to do again."
Again, it's not bad, and I have tons
Yeah,
of friends who done that, and also even Broadway is so much expanding because so much younger people are coming there. So
yeah,
like I have some friends like Will Beeman and Monty and Mater and Monty and the Monsters who play rock. They're like,
okay,
they can play that country stuff, but they are rock people. Uh,
yeah,
so you are seeing that, but I like those venues, like you said, like the Underdog, like, Rudy's Jazz Room, or,
yeah,
some of the other places we were talking about that kind of host the jams and stuff like that, that are usually, to your point, run by musicians
yeah.
and have that idea of, I want to give you a space. And that's a really cool thing that's starting to happen a lot more around town. That's
Absolutely.
very cool.
Absolutely. And it makes sense because, you know, you start to get artists in there that have, like I don't put much stock into the numbers, but we have more followings out online than people that are established in town. I guess what I'm saying is
Sure.
like I play with artists that are signed to record deals and I have 3 times as many YouTube subscribers as they have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like because I work at it, it's part of my business as well. That's not any kind of like braggadocious thing. It's just like, no, I actually have an outreach. I can like,
Yeah.
I streamed my last show and there was a couple hundred people on the stream and the world knows about that little bar,
Yeah.
and they were saying it in the chat.
Well, and I think that's important. So we were talking about blues jams, and that's kind of a thing near and
Yeah.
dear to my heart as well.
Yeah.
And, a lot of places will have those jams, and then they might say, well, I want to bring in, like an established act or, an actual act that plays.
Right.
And a lot of places have found they bring in those acts and their crowds just die off. Because when you bring in a jam, usually again, like because we're in Nashville, house bands usually have, oh, that guy, oh, he played with the Allman Brothers and he played with this person, he played with that person. Like they have a rap sheet of music places they played with, and now you have like 5 of them, and so they kind of bring their own crowd, and then you have people who are coming to jam that bring their own crowd, and more importantly, to your point, we are in the internet age. All of those people are sharing all their stuff out on social media,
Exactly. And
filming themselves, putting it out there, and it's all it does is grow a crowd.
you're 100% right. And it also ties into the way that I can talk about later when you want to bring up the social media aspect of stuff, is that it takes a lot to get somebody off their couch. And if you can get them to go there and they benefit some way, like
Right.
getting up to play with someone that was in a well-known touring band, like you're continuing to make that experience more fun and to give that person something they can remember. And that's what I try to do with every video that I put out. Like, how can I add value to that person's life and experience at that moment? And I think that's why what happens, what you're saying is they bring the bigger artist in, and people don't come because they're like, well, I could just watch that person online, or I want to go to that bar because that's where I jam.
Right. Well, I do want to get to the YouTube stuff, but I do want to talk about the album.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
the music you've got out there, and we'll talk about stuff that's coming up too. So, yeah, I
Sure.
was looking at Well Suited.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was you because you didn't have you didn't have
Favorite
your
mustache.
literally your trademark Van Dyke at the time.
Yeah.
Very Oscar Isaac on
Yeah.
that.
Right.
But it is, that album is a great melting pot of, like you said, we were talking about earlier.
Oh, thanks.
It's bluesy, it's country, it's, roots. And I'll even say, well, on one of the instrumentals, I was listening to it and I was like, that sounded Satriani-ish, a
Oh,
little,
wow.
you were shredding on something. I was like, ooh, that was a little Satriani run there. Kind of nice. Tell me how that project came together and how you took all that stuff and put it
You
into
nailed it. It's kind of like I just wanted to make like a little musical business card
that. Mhm.
for my first effort. Um, and I did that. I started that when I lived in Pittsburgh. I have a really great friend up there. His name's Sean McDonald, and he's like the big fish in a small pond. He's as good of a producer and engineer as you'll find anywhere. But he's a Pittsburgh guy, born and bred, and is highly, highly respected. And gets it's so nice working with a producer. I produce stuff for people, and I think you just see things from a different perspective and they draw something out of you. Like, what if you did it this way, or what if you did it that way? So it's always nice to work with somebody like that,
Right.
which is why I have in the past and continue to, which we'll also talk about. But in any case, that was like, I was like, hey, I got a couple instrumental ideas. I have a couple tunes. Let's see if we can work them up. And we did. And it was really fun because we had a couple different drummers, a couple different bass players. I tracked some of it here. When I moved, I went back there and did some vocals, stuff like that. Um, and it was just basically a way to kind of put some stuff out there. Some people use some of those instrumentals for their podcasts now, which is really
Right.
cool. So it was like, okay, let me just, it's a really terrifying thing to make a record, you know, and I think people are lying when they say that it's not, because you're putting that stuff out in the boat and then you're just pushing it off the shore, and or out to the ocean to see what happens. Um, so that was my attempt at that, and it isn't a record that I think like, oh man, this is something I'm gonna ride forever. It was just my first toe in the water at making a record, and it's got a couple different things on it for people. So
And it's got a lot of great stuff. How was that experience? Did that shape a lot of what you're doing now? Did it, so I know, you talked about how you do a lot of the producing and the other side of that too. What was it like to be on both sides? And which side do you like more? Or is it? Is
well,
it?
I used to think I wanted to be a producer, and I had produced a lot of different things. I had a studio in Pittsburgh. I worked with different artists down here. People find you when you're here. Nashville's the mecca for that kind of stuff. So they come from out of town. You work with them for 4 days. You get most of their record done, and then you start piecemealing it after that. And what ended up happening for me is it was a follow through that, like, I just didn't find, like, once you start working on a record for a year and a half or 2 years, you start to get kind of bored with it and you just want to get it done. And I think, and then people's tastes change. Artists say, like, I wrote these new songs. I don't like those old songs. Like, you got to finish these old songs. Like, because all of my effort is in them. So I was like, again, I got to put the effort in my own stuff. in my own life. So I'd rather now be the artist and work with a producer than the other way around. Um, that's way more fun for me.
But it give
Um,
you a good respect for the producer job, though.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I always hired people or worked with people that said, "My hands are off the table. You do what you want, and let me hear it." You know, and they would be highly involved, but it would be more about like, this is the vision I see, and I have a pretty good track record with nailing it for them. Like they tell me the influences and what they like the sound of, and then we start to mold the song to kind of go that way. And it never sounds like what they're not copying anything. It's just in the spirit of
Sure.
something. But what I learned in Nashville is like, okay, I think I have the ability to produce my own stuff as well. So I'll start to do that a little more as I write and put out more stuff just for efficiency, you know.
Sure. Well, and producer, I don't think people who are not in the music industry understand that a great producer could make or break an album. I love all the behind the scenes, like I love Rick Beato and hearing about
Yeah.
all his behind the scenes stuff. And other music podcasts that will take an album and they'll kind of break it down and say, all right, here's these albums that you love that were produced by these people. And they
Right.
switch producers and then they put out this crap album. And it's not coincidence. Or here's an album that has 20 producers.
Yeah.
And you kind of hear the influence that, to your point, they're not driving it, but it's kind of this little nudge here, there that can save and get the best representation of the artist out.
And that's what I think my favorite producer, my two favorite ones, is Daniel Lanois and Butch Walker. And they both bring, you can hear their voice, you can hear their imprint on the music, but it doesn't cloud the artist's voice.
Right.
So those are guys that I really have looked up to on the producer side of things, just because they have that great ability.
Right. Well, let's get into the YouTube thing. That is definitely how I found you. I was looking for blues tutorials, and I found one of yours, and the tone and phrasing and just tastiness is what caught me.
Oh, thanks.
There's a lot of shredders out there, but just
Oh yeah.
When I grew up, my dad hated the music I played, and he loved Louis Armstrong, and so I would learn to play Louis Armstrong bits on guitar.
Uh-huh.
And I think that helped me also kind of be tastier because
Oh,
it was about tone. And I kind of recognize that's why we were talking about those influences is I'm like, Steve Ray Vaughan, but it is tastiness in there that I really liked. And I had just bought a Blues Junior and you did a whole thing on Blues
Oh, I
Junior.
did.
That was great. I still
Yeah.
go back to it on how to dial it in. Tell me how you got into that and how that took off.
So, I had been working in music stores a lot, all through my teens and early 20s. And when I lived in Pittsburgh, I met a gentleman who became a really good friend of mine. He was my Fender guitar rep for the music store I worked at. And we just stayed in touch forever and were friends for a long, long time. We eventually got into a band together. I eventually started living in his first floor of his house. And he ended up working for the Fishman company that makes like acoustic guitar pickups and stuff. And he said, hey, we're coming out with these effects pedals. We don't have anybody that can make them sound right. Do you want to be like a demo guy for us? I was like, okay, I've never done that before. Now this is like 2007. So all the stuff you see now where everybody demos a piece of gear and it's commonplace, that was not common. There were very few online video demos of any piece of gear. So Fishman, I got to hand it to them. They started working with this company in Florida, and we would go down there and we'd shoot these demo videos, and they'd had the ability to see the analytics, way before any of that was a thing. I know you're a tech guy, so I know you get this, but this is, what it's like between 07 and where we're at now, a lot has happened, So they're like, oh, we could watch see how many people watch that video, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm walking around this complex. It was just like a really cool office building with gear in it and stuff. But there's all these guitar players, like 8x10 headshots. Arlen Roth, Tommy Emmanuel, Muriel Anderson, all these different people. And I'm like, what's up with all these guitar players? And they're like, oh, this isn't really what we do, these video shoots. we make online guitar courses. And I was like, really? And they're like, oh yeah, we're a company called True Fire. And I was like, oh, okay. They're like, do you teach? And I was like, yeah, I teach like 60 students a week in a 4x6 closet in a music store. So they said, well, we should talk sometime about doing something together. You're good on camera. And I was like, okay. So like a year goes by or more, and we finally do. And that's what kind of got me started into the online, teaching and demoing and presenting and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I realized like it took me a while, but I realized like how many people you actually reach, how you can actually grow a little fan base on your own from that. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Because I was not great at it, I'm much better now. But that's kind of how it all started. And up until it was basically a year ago yesterday, after having done all this online teaching, my my own lesson site is now a year old. It's called workingclassguitar.com. And it's taken all that time to kind of have my own company and my own YouTube presence and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where it all came from.
And it seems like, because I know you're an artist rep for a lot of different companies, but it also seems like, people are coming to you now, and you, because you do such a good job of really breaking something down and doing that. What is it, is that, has that become more of what you're doing? How do you balance that with your actual making music?
Well, I'm not really like an artist rep for any company. The last thing I did was with Martin in that
Okay.
capacity. And I retired from that, just to give myself more flexibility on all levels.
Sure.
Um, and I was never really, other than Fishman, like official with anybody, only because they companies still don't find it advantageous to put somebody like me on a payroll. You know, they'd
Right.
rather hire me for one-off gigs, which is totally fine. I'd actually rather have it that way.
Okay.
There wasn't a when I was more destitute in my 20s, that would have sounded like a good idea. But um, so in any case, yeah, companies come to me, and I only really the cool thing is we talked about this being such a small world. I only really work with companies that I'm friends with. I'm friends with 2Rock. I'm friends with Universal Audio. I'm friends with PRS. These are all people that have really great folks working for them that treat you with respect and kindness and generosity. And I'm legit friends. Like I mean, there's people at Universal Audio I've known since I was 20 years old, like a kid, and now they're grown and they have kids, um, so we have that bond. And if I believe in the product and they say, hey, would you want to do a demo on this, then I do it. And I try to make my demos, like you were saying with the Blues Junior, like a teachable moment. It's
Right.
not any, it's not a platform for me to perform necessarily. There'll be little performances in there, but it's about, again, going back to what we talked about before. What can I give you? What can help and enrich your experience with this piece of gear? That's what I'm interested in. And it sounds like really kind of like new agey and BS, but it's true. Like I have no interest in doing this just to like puff my feathers out. Like I want to make everybody have a fun experience.
Well, and that's what I found. I go to lots of your videos, and that's what I like about it. Just the most recent one I think that I was really digging is I want to buy the Ducatone, and you did that whole
Oh,
Ducatone one,
yeah.
and really explore like it is honest. It's let's dial everything. It's you because sometimes you'll go and see one of those, and all it is somebody playing,
Yeah.
and also they're usually playing stuff I don't play.
Right.
And what I like about you is, I think you and I have a lot of the same influences. So you're like, all right, well, and you do a lot of different stuff. Let's get a bluesy tone out of this. Let's get a rock tone out of this. And
Yep.
you really get in depth in that. And it is about, it's about the product, but it's also, is this product good for you as a
Yeah.
person? That's what I feel like it is.
And there's so many people that buy those products because they saw somebody playing, but there was no like description about how it was dialed in or what the thoughts were or the guitar that they were using or a whole host of things. And that's so important. I mean, I can't cover everything in a video. I certainly try, but it's not. You also too, like, you're coming to my channel because you say, you know, the information, but you said we had the same influences. Well, the metal guy's not going to come to my channel, and that's okay, because now I have to keep cultivating those folks that do play like what I play like, or like the sounds that I create, or whatever. So that's another important thing I'm always considering too. Again, I want people, when they go to the blues jam, if all of a sudden, you know, there was a punk band playing there, they'll be like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, like, I'm going home. So there you go. You got to know your audience a little bit.
Well, and the thing that I like is, to your point, you said you are working with people you like, and I like these products, or I'm just on it giving my honest review. You're not, it's not a, because like a lot of places will put out, these are our people that we've asked to go and do a review, and those are a
Yes.
little bit more controlled. And there's definitely stuff that I have bought either because I saw you play it, or guys like Rhett Scholl
Yep.
or stuff like that. Guys that I'm like, all right, if this guitar snob likes this thing, then it has to be pretty good. Yeah,
Well,
these guys don't play stuff that doesn't do its job.
right. And you go back to just like that company MXR, like, my friend at Universal Audio is really good friends with George Trips. George Trips worked with Mike from Analog Man so that they could create this mass-produced version of this pedal. To me, all the dots connect. I like all those people. They're all in this game because they just want to make good products.
Right.
You know, they're not like would I review a Boss pedal? Maybe, but I know Boss is like this. They're stamping it out. Now I think they do. Like, Boss is like, I'm just picking on them. They started Chorus, they started so many things like important to the guitar world, but they have the capabilities to say, okay, we'll do this, we'll stamp it out, we'll make that product. And I do like a lot of their products. But that being said, they're huge. Analog Man is small. They couldn't
Right.
make mass-produced versions of the Ducatone. Bring in George Trips, who's an amazing inventor. Anybody that works with Eric Johnson on a fuzz pedal for 6 years is dedicated, you know? So you take that relationship. Oh, okay. I've met Jim Dunlop Jr. I met those guys. Like, they're good people. They want to make cool shit. I want to be involved with that.
Absolutely. So this is going to be a very unfair question.
Okay.
The studio's on fire. You get to save one thing.
Oh man. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold and I'm so
Don't worry.
so scratchy. Well, I have two hands.
All right, I'll give you two.
So I'd probably grab the 61 Casino,
Okay.
and I do have a 65 Trini Lopez that is very, very cool guitar. Very new to me. I just got it. The drag is that I do have a 64 SG Junior that is amazing. So one of those three would be lost in the fire. I don't even like to talk about that. I was just talking about my insurance stuff. I'm like, this is so scary to me, you know.
But I mean, obviously you have gear acquisition syndrome, just like the rest of us. And, and we were talking about earlier about how we identify people by their gear. Like there's people, I don't know their names, but I know exactly what they play.
In the music store, would be like, oh, that's pointy headstock guy.
Yeah, true.
Like in the 90s, it was like, oh, reverse headstock guy. Him. He bought that Ibanez. You're like, oh yeah, I know that guy.
Yeah. Well, and you've played so many, different guitars, in your videos and things like that. And it's a thing that it does make me go like, oh, okay, I've been a Strat guy for pretty much all my life. Mm-hmm. And, I think you and Rhett Scholl maybe go look at is it the Novo guitars? Yeah. And those guys, well, my first range, but great guitars, and other stuff like that, and I know you've done a lot with the Silver Sky, because that was one that I was looking at as well. And again, it's a thing where you've done these reviews that really explore the instrument, and it's just kind of a unfiltered, just this is what you can do with this instrument. It may be for you, it may not be for you, but these are all the things that it can do for you in your hands.
Well, I just did that with this, like, inexpensive Epiphone Casino, because I have a 61 that I got for a really good deal about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. That was about 5. And everybody asked me about it on the channel. And it is like, it is a blues machine. Like, you've heard me play that guitar. Like, it's a great, great sounding instrument. So I was like, let me get the $699 Chinese version, see what it sounds like. So I did a video with it. People were really enjoying it. Um, and it's just an experiment to walk through the guitar and say, okay, I think this is a nice guitar for $700.
Right.
I'd probably change the pickups. I'd probably have somebody rewire it because that's a weak link in a guitar of that price range. Would you be happy with it on its own? Yes, totally. But if we're trying to get it to the next level, that's probably what I would do. And I had a lot of people say, I'd never change the pickups. Don't do it. Or which pickups would I change? Or would you change to? So there was like a lot of back and forth on it. And the idea was like, yeah, it's not this vintage guitar, but it's also not 10 grand.
Right.
I mean, my Casino was not 10 grand. It was well under that. But it's also not, it's a, 60-year-old guitar,
Well, there's also a difference in, as musicians, the audience really doesn't care,
Sure.
especially when you're on the road. Like there's what you play in the studio, and then there's what you take on the road. And what you take on the road is more about, it has to reach a certain level of quality, but it doesn't have to be the same level of quality because, all the people in the front row don't care. There's maybe one or two of us going cross-armed in the back going, he's not doing that.
Well, I won't tour with a vintage guitar unless it's like I've taken vintage guitars on the road, but it was in a really safe way, like in a way that was like on a truck, in a vault, in a guitar vault, that was locked in place. We'd bungee the guitars in every night, make sure they're really strapped in. But that's where the PRSs came into play because I was doing a lot of touring for different artists. And dude, I'd put double bag over my shoulder, 2 PRSs under the plane, pull it out, go to the gig, tune it up, perfect. Like neck straight as an arrow, like no issues at all. Going through all those climate changes, all the humidity, all the elevation, rock solid, 100%.
You need workhorses on the road.
Yeah, you really do, because you beat the crap out of them, and then you're sweat, like you play those country tours and stuff, and you're playing in like 90-degree, 100-degree weather, you're dripping sweat all over them, and it's kind of a fun thing. Like I like to beat the shit out of a guitar, but I also like for it to work the next gig.
Yeah. Well, even with like your pedals and stuff like that. Like I love my pedal board, but like you'll see people downtown and they have like the Helix, the stuff and things like that because it's so convenient. And again, a bunch of drunk tourists don't care. They're not like, oh, that's not true bypass.
That's one of the things when you play in that Nashville scene, you're gonna get a bunch of rowdy drunk people, and I've had one too many drinks spilled on my pedal board to like, if I was doing the downtown circuit, I'd have one of those tiny little nano boards with like 3 pedals on it.
Right.
And anything that I could replace a Guitar Center the next day if I had to. That's I wouldn't take a vintage instrument. I wouldn't take a vintage amp. It would be, plug and play.
Right. I was just having a conversation with a guy, Jasco, online, and we were talking about amps. And of course, all these guys have these classic amps, stuff like that. And I'm like, listen, I got a PV Classic 30 that has never let me down. Yeah.
That's a great amp.
Yeah. It has a couple little mods in it, but it is a workhorse. It's light for that size amp, and it's, fairly cheap. If I had to replace it, it wouldn't kill me.
Yeah.
But it's been a great amp, and it rocks.
Awesome. Yeah. Those Delta Blues amps they made were really cool too. Those are like 210s, I think. And I had a Classic 50 years and years and years ago, the 410 Classic 50. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I finally did get a Blues Junior, but that's kind of like the Fender version of that. It's nice and small. It doesn't need to be crazy loud. I'm not playing a stadium. And, I know it's when I turn it on, it's going to work, and I'm going to get what I need out of it.
Quick story about a Blues Junior in a stadium. I was playing with Lucy Silvis, and all the big artists love her in town because she writes with them, and we were doing a quick run with Miranda Lambert.
Okay.
And she said, you don't have to bring an amp because you're going to use the band's back line. And I was like, great. I'm sure they got nice gear. I know one of the guitar players, he's got great amps. We get there, we realize that they have prop amps on stage. Everybody's real amps are underneath the stage, mic'd up, real pro. So, but the prop amps were like a Tweed Blues Junior, a Tweed 410 Bassman. And I was like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected. I thought we were gonna play through a cool rig. All I need is a clean channel on most gigs, and everything else I can get from pedals. And the bass player played the 410 Bassman. It sounded awesome. Her music's real. We want it to sound old anyway. And I played the Blues Junior in arenas, mic'd up, and it sounded freaking awesome. Like, it sounded so good. I could not believe it. And the cool thing was her tech became like my tech for like 6 shows, and he'd have everything set up when I walked on stage, because we were driving in a van, like, we're
Right.
pretty low budget on that tour. We had other stuff in other tours, but this was a quick run and gun sort of thing. And it was so awesome. And I'm like, there's my little baby Blues Junior right there. In this giant, like 20,000 seat basketball arena. It sounded great.
Well, everybody sees the pictures now, but I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, I was going to MTSU and Motley Crue came into town. And
Yeah.
they had that wall of Marshalls. I snuck in because I had a class that was in the thing, and they canceled the classes, but they didn't know that. And I snuck in and sat with the guitar tech for Warrant and talked to him and all that stuff. And I went, and they're all just fake. There was was one that was real, and then everything else, this wall of amps, was just all fake.
Yeah, lots of times they'll cut them like right here.
Yeah.
Maybe like, I don't know, 3 inches deep on the cabinet, and that'll be the wall. I've seen that before. I've seen Eric Church's guys have that. They have 1 amp under the stage, and the rest is like a giant wall. Who cares?
It still sounds great.
Whatever. Kiss would tell you to do it.
There you go. Well, Corey, I appreciate you taking so much time today. I know we've covered a lot of ground. Let's end with where can people find you and what's kind of coming up for you next?
Well, these days you can find just about anybody online. I'm in all the usual spots, all the social media stuff. If you are somebody that wants to learn about, wants to learn what I'm teaching in a blues fashion, the gear is always kind of in the blues rock, vein. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe there. There's videos usually once a week. That's what I'll be doing after I get on the call with you, and start preparing for that video. So that's where you can find me. I have a website, CoreyCongilio.com. I don't have any tour dates or any shows posted there because we kind of just post them via social media. As I get more shows on a current basis, you'll see them there. And that's it. Just, find me anywhere, Instagram, Facebook, say hello.
And you're pretty regularly popping up at the Underdog every now and then.
Yeah, I'm there
I've
usually.
got you a couple of times.
Once just a month, for the most part. And trying to find some other places for my guys to play.
Perfect. All right, Corey, I sure appreciate it. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy.